So in this video, I want to talk about something that I'm hoping everyone has at least some familiarity with, which is slope. Specifically, I'm trying to review slope for what we're going to do during this unit, which is talk about derivatives. So this is in preparation for calculus. By the end of this video, hopefully you know the formulas for finding slope and writing equations of lines. I want you to gain a better understanding of what slope is and to be able to calculate slope between 2 points. So let's start off with what the definition of slope is. You can use the word direction. I know I've seen other people use the word steepness, um, or we can even just use the word movement. Um, all of these three things are trying to get at the heart of what slope actually does. It's describing the direction of the movement or how steep a line or a curve is. Another way people have described slope is rise over run, which is a really good way to describe it, but we have to be careful with, in this case, what we're looking at is, in terms of the increments on the x's and the y values. Um, the other way we can think about it is as it's a rate of change. It is the change in y divided by the change in x. These are all pretty good explanations of what a slope is. Again, it can do with uh, both a curve or a line. So the common formula that I give out for the slope formula is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now, most people jump right at y equals mx plus b. That is not the slope formula. That is the equation of a line. I'm specifically talking about here the slope formula. Okay. Another formula that I commonly give out, and some people really like this one, is we use delta y divided by delta x. Now, these are capital letter deltas. They look like triangles. And all they're, again, trying to do is trying to represent the difference, the change in these two variables. So essentially, subtract them, divide them, see what happens. Please make sure that order does matter. You need to make sure that you're using the same point for the first subtraction for the first y and x, and the same point for the second one. So now that I've got the formula handled for that, let's go ahead and just jump into some examples. So example 1 says, I want to find the slope between 4 comma negative 3 and 6 comma negative 8. I'm just going to try to start off by just labeling these points. So we'll label it as x1, y1, and x2, y2. And then I'm going to go ahead and start plugging into that formula, which is the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So when I plug these in, y2 is 8, or excuse me, negative 8, minus y1 is negative 3, over x2 is 6 minus 4. So I'm going to grab my handy dandy little calculator and type that in. I'll do the negative 8 minus negative 3, which gives me negative 5, over 6 minus 4, which is 2. I do typically prefer, and I'll write that down, prefer slope to be in fraction form. I'm okay with it being a decimal, but fractions are preferred. That's just generally for me. So that's going to be my final answer, is that negative 5 over 2. I would also accept negative 2.5, but I prefer the negative 5 over 2. In example 2, instead of given 2 points, we're given a function and asks me to find the slope between the 2 points on the interval 1 and 9. So notice in this case, these are actually going to be my x values. So x1 will be 1 and x2 is going to be 9. Now in this case, it doesn't actually give me the y values, but it gives me this function instead. So I'm going to plug those in. So if I plug in x1, y1 should be the square root of x1, which is the square root of 1, which is just positive 1. If I plug in x2, that'll give me y2. So we're going to take the square root of 9, which is 3. So those are my y values there. And all I'm going to do is, again, just plug them into the formula. y2 is 3 minus y1, which is 1, over x2, which is 9, minus x1, which is 1. 3 minus 1, trusty little calculator tells me that's 2. And 9 minus 1, trusty little calculator tells me that's 8. I can simplify 2 over 8 to 1 over 4, And again, I prefer fractions. I'm going to leave that as my final answer. If you put 0.25, I'll still give you credit, but I'm not going to be as happy with it as I would be that fraction. Okay, now that I've talked about slope, I want to move on to writing linear equations and talking about those. So there are a couple of different ways that we can write linear equations. Probably the most common way that people see them for the first time is slope-intercept form, which again is y equals mx plus b. In this case, slope is represented by the letter m, and the y-intercept, and I'm making sure I write that down, y-intercept is b. Okay, that's where it crosses the y-axis. Other common forms, one that's really common people see pretty often, is standard form. It's written as capital AX plus BY equals C. A, B, and C are numbers. Um, and I want you to think about this for a second, is if I wanted to find the slope of this line, I would probably try to rewrite it as slope-intercept form. And what that means is I'm going to have to move this AX over to the other side, which makes it negative. And then I would have to divide by whatever B is. So it's going to be negative A divided by B. And that should tell me what my slope is for standard form. Now, point slope form is another common one, but it's not so common. Hopefully people saw this in Algebra 2, but if you didn't, it's not a big deal. It is important that I write this very, very carefully so as not to be confused. So in this case, point slope form takes in a point and the slope. So that means what I need is I need a point instead of just the y-intercept, I need any point. So we're going to start off with y minus, I'll write it as y 0, why not, equals m, the slope, times x minus x 0, x naught. And so again, in this case, slope is represented by the letter m, and our extra point is going to be x naught, y naught, x0, y0. Okay, so if we know a point, we can plug it into point slope form, and it makes life easier. I will suggest that you do memorize this one because it is by far the most helpful one in all of calculus. Point slope form is going to be probably the easiest one. From there, I'm also going to talk about vertical lines. Vertical lines appear as x equals some number, like for example, x equals 7. But it could really be any number, so I'll just let's write capital N for any number, okay? And important thing to know about vertical lines, their slope is always undefined, okay? It's always going to be a number divided by 0, so we write that again as undefined. We only say it's infinite if we're talking about limits, but we're not talking about limits, we're just talking about a calculation. We're talking about actually plugging in a number and getting out an answer, so we're going to leave it as undefined, okay? Do not ever write no slope. Don't write that as an answer. Undefined is the correct answer. Horizontal lines is going to be y equals, I'm going to again use a capital N. It could be any number you want. Could be a 7, could be a 1, could be anything at all. What we're going to notice with these is we're going to have y values that are the same. For vertical lines, the x values are going to be the same. That means in this case, our slope is going to be 0. Okay, and that's an important thing to remember. From there, I do want to go over some of these examples really quickly. Example 3 says to determine the slope of the line 4x minus 3y equals 24. That equation is in standard form, so you can either use this little shortcut that I shared over here, or again, you could try to go through and work it out. Just switch it to slope-intercept form. Again, the idea that I would have is subtract 4x from both sides, which will give me negative 3y equals negative 4x plus 24. Then we're going to divide by that negative 3. And I'm going to do that to everything, not just the first part. And that'll give me y equals negative 4 divided by negative 3 gives me 4/3 x. Again, I really like fractions. And then I'm going to do 24 divided by negative 3, which gives me negative 8. So that is the equation in slope-intercept form, which tells me my slope is 4/3. Again, I could have gotten it with my little shortcut over here. I'm going to write my shortcut again. So if I take a, which is this 4, and I change its sign, make it -4, and I divide by b, which is -3, we still get 4/3. It's just got double negatives to make it positive. So again, nice little shortcut that makes things work out nicely. Example 4 is a little bit different though. It says find the equation of the line through the points 6, -6, and 4, -9. And I'm going to try my best to write this in slope-intercept form. And it's just going to take me a couple of steps to do that. The first step, step 1, is going to be actually finding the slope. Okay? So that's going to be the very first thing that I do here, is use those 2 points to find the slope. So I'm going to do x1, y1, and x2, y2. So y2 is -9 minus y1 is -6 over x2, which is -4 minus +6. So if I do calculator, -9 minus -6 gives me -3. -4 minus 6 gives me -10. Double negatives cancel out, but the 3 and 10 don't simplify. So I'm going to leave that as my slope. From there, step 2 will be to set up the slope-intercept form of the line. So that's y equals mx plus b. And in this case, I've got m. That's that 3/10. Okay. The last thing I need to find is my y-intercept, the b. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in one of these points. And it doesn't matter what the point I choose is. It just needs to be one of the 2 points I'm given. Okay, and I'm just going to plug it in for the x and the y. So in this case, I guess I'll choose the 6, -6, just to make my life easier. So the -6 again is the y value, so I'm going to plug that in first. -6 equals 3 over 10 times my x value, which is the +6, plus b. I'm going to go ahead and start multiplying the 3/10 times 6. If I take that in my trusty little calculator, 3/10 times 6 gives me 9/5. 9/5 plus b. And then I'm going to subtract the 9/5 from both sides. And again, go to my trusty little calculator. -6 minus 9/5 gives me -39 over 5. And that is going to be my final answer for B. And step number 4 is plug it all back in. Okay, so my final answer here is going to be y equals 3/10 x minus 39 over 5. And that is going to be the final answer for that equation. Now, that's just trying to make it in slope-intercept form. If you wanted to try to put it in a different form, that would work too. But now that I've got one equation, I can go from there and find the others. Hopefully this does help kind of refresh your memory on all of that slope stuff before we move on to some of the calculus stuff that we need to learn. Have a great day.